You can sit alone today, Daniel. No one is standing with you. Claire said it in the courthouse hallway with her hand resting on her lawyer's sleeve like she was the one who needed protection. Before you judge me, listen closely, because the last receipt starts with the person who smiles while ruining you. I looked at the empty chair beside me, then back at my wife. My wife, I said, and my voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. Not after today, Claire said. After today, I'm whatever Grace needs me to be. The courthouse bench felt cold through my suit pants. My throat went dry. Around us, shoes clicked against polished tile, phones buzzed, and strangers lowered their voices like pain was contagious. I had come here thinking we were signing a temporary custody agreement. Claire had brought a war. Her lawyer, Miles Avery, stepped forward with a folder pressed flat against his chest. Mr. Whitman, he said, my client has decided she can no longer support shared custody until the court reviews new concerns. New concerns? I asked. Claire tilted her head. Her eyes shone just enough to look wounded. Daniel, please don't make this ugly. You told me this was a settlement hearing. It was, she said. Until you made it impossible. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the old Claire to blink through the mask. She didn't. My sister Sandra stood near the vending machines, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She had driven 2 hours because she thought this hearing would end quietly. Claire, Sandra said, what is going on? Claire turned toward her like she had rehearsed that too. I didn't want you to find out this way. Sandra's face tightened. Find out what? That Grace is afraid of him. The paper cup in my hand bent under my fingers. That's a lie. Claire flinched like I had shouted, though my voice barely carried. See, she whispered. This is what I mean. Judith, Claire's mother, stepped out from behind Miles. She wore her church coat and the pearl earrings she used whenever she wanted to look respectable. Daniel, Judith said, no one is attacking you. We're trying to protect a child. A child I raised. A child who has been crying herself to sleep. I looked from Judith to Claire. Grace cried herself to sleep because her mother took her phone away for 2 weeks. Claire's mouth twitched. I took her phone because she needed space from your pressure. She texted me from her school tablet. Miles opened his folder. That will be discussed before Judge Marlowe. My heartbeat started hitting hard enough that I could feel it in my neck. I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab every lie out of the air before it landed on me. Then I remembered Ruth's warning. Don't wrestle with a liar in a hallway. Let them talk where the truth can breathe. So I slid my phone out of my coat pocket and tapped the voice memo app without looking down. Claire kept speaking. You think recording everything makes you look calm, she said. I kept my hand still. What makes me look calm is not answering every performance you give. Her smile faded for half a second. Sandra stepped closer to me. Daniel, did something happen with Grace? I turned to my sister. No. Then why would Claire say this in court? Because she knows people believe mothers faster when fathers look scared. Sandra looked hurt by that. That's not fair. You're right, I said. None of this is. Claire sighed softly, the kind of sigh she used when bills were late and she wanted me to feel guilty before she asked for money. I begged him to get help, she said to Sandra. I begged him to stop making Grace choose sides. You begged me to sign the college fund over to you, I said. Judith's eyes sharpened. That fund belongs to Grace. Exactly. Claire's hand tightened on her purse. Daniel, don't twist this. I almost laughed, but it would have sounded broken. Twist it? You told me last night that Grace wanted us both in the room today. She did, Claire said. Then where is she? No one answered. The hallway noise seemed to thin. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us, sharp and white. My tongue tasted like old coffee and fear. For one ugly second, I wondered if Claire was telling the truth. Maybe Grace really had been crying. Maybe every unanswered call meant my daughter had chosen silence. Maybe the girl who used to run down the driveway yelling, "Dad, don't leave yet," had grown into someone who needed me gone. That thought did what Claire's words could not. It cracked me. Miles checked his watch. "We should go in." I looked at Claire. "Tell me one thing before we do." She lifted her chin. "What? Did Grace write the statement herself?" Claire blinked. Judith answered before she could. "Of course she did." I did not look away from Claire. "Claire?" "She told me what she felt," Claire said. I helped her find the words. Sandra lowered her coffee cup. "What does that mean?" "It means our daughter was too upset to write it cleanly," Claire said. "It means you wrote it," I said. Miles stepped in. "That is an accusation." "No," I said. "That is a question she is afraid to answer." Claire's eyes hardened. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Make me the villain because you can't accept that Grace has her own mind." I felt the pale mark under my wedding ring. I had taken the ring off 2 months ago, but the skin still remembered it. Grace had once held that ring in both hands when she was 7. "Dad, this means you don't quit, right?" I had laughed and told her, "That's exactly what it means." Now the ring was gone, and Claire was using our daughter's name like a blade. The courtroom doors opened. A clerk called, "Whitman custody matter." Claire immediately changed her face. Her shoulders softened. Her eyes watered. She looked like a mother walking into a storm. I looked like the storm. Sandra touched my arm. "Daniel, please tell me you have proof." I looked down at my phone. The red recording line was still moving. "I have a start." Claire heard me. For the first time that morning, her smile slipped completely. "You wouldn't dare use that." I put the phone back in my pocket. "You just told everyone Grace was afraid of me. Don't get shy now." Judith grabbed Claire's elbow. "Claire, what did he record?" "Nothing important," Claire snapped. But her voice had changed. That was when I knew this hearing had not started inside the courtroom. It had started last night, when Claire called me sweetly and said, "Let's stop fighting, Daniel. Grace deserves peace." It had started when she sent me the wrong courtroom time, then corrected it 10 minutes before I left. It had started when she said Grace's phone was broken, but refused to let me send a replacement. And it had started when I believed her because part of me still wanted the woman I married to be buried somewhere under the woman destroying me. Miles held the door open. Claire walked in first. Judith followed her. Sandra hesitated beside me. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered. I swallowed the hurt and nodded. "Then watch." I stepped toward the courtroom alone, with my hands steady and my whole life shaking underneath them. Claire had planned for me to look abandoned. She had not planned for me to listen. Judge Marlowe looked over the top of her glasses and said, "Mr. Whitman, sit at counsel table." I sat beside Ruth Bennett, my attorney, while Claire settled across the aisle like she had been carried there by sorrow. She wore soft gray, no jewelry except a small cross necklace I had never seen before. Ruth leaned toward me. "Breathe through your nose." "Let her perform first." "I'm not angry," I whispered. "That is not what your hands are saying." I looked down. My knuckles were white around the edge of the table. Across the room, Claire dabbed the corner of one eye with a tissue. There were no tears on it. Just the motion. Miles stood. "Your Honor, my client is not here to punish Mr. Whitman. She is here because she believes their daughter, Grace, needs immediate emotional safety." Judge Marlowe nodded once. "Define immediate." Miles opened his folder. "Restricted communication pending review. Supervised visitation only. No private calls. No school pickup. No access to Grace's medical or counseling records without court approval." The air left my chest. Ruth's hand touched my sleeve before I could rise. "Sit," she murmured. Claire looked at me with soft eyes. I know this hurts you, Daniel. Don't, I said. Judge Marlowe's gaze moved to me. Mr. Whitman. I sat back. Claire lowered her voice, but not enough to hide it. I don't want him humiliated. I just want him helped. Ruth stood slowly. Your Honor, before this gets wrapped in concern, we need to clarify that this filing was not shared with us before arrival. My client was told this was a settlement hearing. Miles said the concern escalated overnight. Ruth turned one page. Conveniently overnight? Claire pressed the tissue to her mouth. That's exactly what I was afraid of. Everything becomes an attack. Judge Marlowe raised a hand. Mrs. Whitman, you'll have time. Claire nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Her apology landed perfectly. Soft. Small. Polished. Judith sat behind her, stiff with approval. Sandra sat 2 rows behind me, and when I glanced back, she did not meet my eyes. That hurt more than Miles's motion. Miles continued. For years, Mr. Whitman has placed emotional pressure on Grace. He demands loyalty. He tracks messages. He inserts himself into school and social decisions. Grace has expressed anxiety around disappointing him. That's false, I said. Ruth whispered, Daniel. But Judge Marlowe heard me. Mr. Whitman, your attorney will respond. Claire's shoulders shook once. He doesn't realize he's doing it, she said. That's why I didn't leave sooner. I kept thinking if I loved him enough, he would see it. I stared at her. Loved me enough. The same woman who had not touched my hand in 11 months. The same woman who changed every password in the house after I refused to drain Grace's college fund for her brother's failed business. Miles lifted a sheet. We have a written statement from Grace. Ruth's eyes narrowed. Is Grace present? No, Miles said. My client did not believe subjecting her to this courtroom would be healthy. Yet you are asking the court to restrict a father based on a child's unsworn statement, Ruth said. Based on a pattern, Miles replied. Judge Marlowe looked at Ruth. I'll review the statement, but I will not treat it as testimony. Claire turned slightly toward me. I told you this was going to happen if you kept pushing her. I leaned forward. When did I push her? Claire blinked. Daniel, please. No. Say it clearly. Judge Marlowe said, Mr. Whitman. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I want to know what I allegedly did besides ask why my daughter stopped answering me. Miles answered fast. You overwhelmed her with messages. Ruth opened her laptop. How many messages? Miles paused. That is not the only issue. How many? Ruth repeated. Claire stared at the table. Enough. Ruth clicked something. From June 3 to August 19, Mr. Whitman sent Grace 9 text messages. 3 were about school pickup, 2 were birthday-related, 1 asked if she wanted her art supplies from his house, and 3 asked whether her phone was working. Claire's jaw tightened. Miles said, tone matters. Ruth looked up. Then let's read the tone. She turned the laptop slightly. First message. Hey, kiddo. Your mom said your phone is broken. I left your blue sweater at the front desk. No rush. Love, Dad. My throat tightened. I remembered folding that sweater. It had smelled like lavender detergent and the peppermint gum Grace always kept in her backpack. Ruth, read the next one. Happy birthday, Gracie. I'm not sure if this is reaching you, but I'm still here. I left your card with Aunt Sandra. Sandra shifted behind me. Ruth did not look back. Third message. I won't call if you need space. I just need to know you are safe. Judge Marlowe looked toward Claire. Mrs. Whitman, why did your daughter not respond? Claire swallowed. She was overwhelmed. Ruth asked, or was her phone removed? Claire's eyes flashed. She needed a break. You told my client the phone was broken. It was practically broken, Claire said. I heard Sandra whisper, practically? Judith turned and gave her a warning look. Sandra sat back, but now she was watching Claire. Judge Marlowe made a note. Mrs. Whitman, did Grace have access to that device during this period? Claire hesitated. She had access when appropriate. Ruth smiled without warmth. That means no. Miles said, parents limit phone use all the time. Parents do, Ruth said. But parents do not tell the other parent the phone is broken, delete messages, and then claim silence as fear. Claire's face paled. I never deleted anything. Ruth clicked again. We'll come to that. For the first time, Claire looked at me like I had brought a weapon she had not checked for. My fear was still there. It sat under my ribs, heavy and stubborn. But something else had joined it. A thin, clean line of anger. Judge Marlowe said, Mrs. Whitman, you may speak. Claire stood. She placed one hand over her chest. I know Daniel thinks I planned this. I didn't. I wish I didn't have to say any of this. He was a good father when Grace was little. Was. That word cut deeper than I expected. When she was young, Claire continued, she adored him. But as she grew up, he couldn't accept that she had boundaries. He treated every missed call like betrayal. Every decision like rejection. I whispered, that is not true. Ruth said softly, let her finish. Claire turned toward the judge. When Grace wanted therapy, Daniel asked why she needed to talk to a stranger. I looked up fast. That's not what happened. Claire kept going. When Grace wanted to spend weekends with friends, Daniel made her feel guilty. When she talked about college, he turned it into his dream, not hers. My stomach twisted. Grace had wanted architecture since she was 9. I still had the drawing. A crooked little house, purple windows, a red door, and 2 stick figures on the porch. Dad's dream house. She had written those words herself. Ruth touched my arm again, but this time I did not move. I just stared at the table and felt every second I had missed. The recital. The birthday dinner. The night Grace called once and hung up before I could answer. Maybe I should have driven over. Maybe I should have fought sooner. Maybe calm had looked too much like surrender. Claire's voice softened. I am not saying Daniel is evil. I am saying he needs help understanding the damage he causes. Judith nodded behind her. Sandra did not. Judge Marlowe asked, Mr. Whitman, through counsel, your response? Ruth stood. My client supports therapy. He paid for the first 3 appointments. We have the invoices. He objected only when Mrs. Whitman refused to disclose the provider's name, location, or whether Grace was actually attending. Miles frowned. That is private medical information. Ruth said, for a minor child, both parents with legal custody have rights to basic provider information unless restricted by court order. There was no order. Judge Marlowe looked at Claire again. Why was the provider's name withheld? Claire's lips parted. I was advised to protect Grace's emotional space. By whom? Claire glanced at Miles. Miles cleared his throat. My client acted based on her understanding. Ruth picked up another page. And while claiming to protect emotional space, Mrs. Whitman blocked Mr. Whitman's number from Grace's phone on July 1st. Claire said, that is not accurate. Ruth looked at me. Daniel, forward it now. I pulled my phone under the table, opened Sandra's message thread, then Ruth's, and forwarded the screenshots Grace had sent me from her school tablet. My hands shook so badly I nearly hit the wrong contact. The email sent. Ruth's laptop pinged. Claire heard it. Her face changed again, just slightly, like a curtain moving in a closed room. Ruth opened the files. Your Honor, We have screenshots from Grace's school tablet. Dated July 2nd. Grace wrote, "Dad, I think Mom blocked you. She says I'm not allowed to answer until you calm down." Judge Marlowe leaned forward. Ruth read another. "I don't know what you did. She won't tell me. Please don't be mad." My eyes burned. I had never received that message. Claire said quickly, "Those are taken out of context." Ruth looked at her. "Then give us the context." Claire's fake sadness thinned into irritation. Grace was confused. "She was caught between us." "No," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. I did not raise my voice. "She was placed between us." Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. Sandra finally spoke from behind me. "Claire, you told me Grace wanted no contact." Claire turned around. "She did." Sandra's voice shook. "Then why was she asking him not to be mad?" Judith said, "Sandra, this is not your place." Sandra looked at Judith. "I drove here because you both told me Daniel was falling apart." I turned just enough to see her. Sandra's eyes were wet now. "I thought you were hiding something from me," she said to me. "Maybe you were just being shut out." Claire sat down hard. Miles whispered to her, but she shook her head. Judge Marlowe closed the folder. "I am not issuing communication restrictions based on what I have heard so far." Claire looked up sharply. "Your Honor, please. Grace needs protection." Judge Marlowe's voice stayed even. "She may. But I am not yet convinced the danger is Mr. Whitman." The room went quiet. For 1 second, I could hear the fluorescent lights again. That same harsh buzz. Only now it sounded less like a warning and more like a witness. Claire turned toward me. Her eyes were no longer soft. "You think this helps you?" she whispered. I looked at Ruth. Ruth looked at the judge. And I let the recorder in my pocket keep running. Ruth looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, before Mrs. Whitman asks this court to believe Grace is being protected, we need to discuss what else she has been protecting." Claire's head snapped toward her. Miles stood again. "Objection to the implication." Judge Marlowe did not blink. "Ms. Bennett hasn't asked a question yet." "Sit down, Mr. Avery." Miles sat. Ruth placed one thin stack of papers on the table. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just paper. Somehow that made Claire look more frightened. Judge Marlowe asked, "What am I looking at?" "Bank notifications tied to Grace Whitman's college fund," Ruth said. "My client set alerts on the account after Mrs. Whitman requested full control of it." Claire laughed once under her breath. "That is disgusting." I looked at her. "What is?" "Using Grace's future to attack me." "No," I said. "Using Grace's future to pay yourself is the attack." Judith rose halfway from her seat. "Daniel, that money was always for Grace." I turned back. "I know." Judith's mouth closed, but her eyes stayed hard. Claire leaned toward her lawyer. Miles whispered, "Let me handle it." Ruth passed a copy to the clerk. There were 3 withdrawals in the last 6 weeks. $4,000. $8,000. Then $12,500. Judge Marlowe read the first page. Claire's voice turned cold. "That was for therapy and legal safety expenses." Ruth looked up. "Then you have invoices?" Claire said, "Not with me. You filed an emergency motion accusing my client of emotional danger, but you did not bring receipts for the expenses used to protect Grace?" Miles said, "The financial issue is separate." Ruth replied, "It became connected when your client claimed she needed sole authority over the child and the child's resources." My chest tightened with every number. 4,000. 8,000. 12,500. Those numbers were not just money. They were Grace's first semester books. Her dorm deposit. Her drafting software. The tiny model building tools she used to ask for at Christmas. When Grace was 9, she had sat on the kitchen floor with cardboard, glue, and crooked scissors. "Dad, one day I'm going to build a house with a library inside the stairs." I had said, "That sounds expensive." She had looked offended. "Then save now." So I did. I saved through overtime, skipped vacations, and old cars with broken heaters. Claire knew that. Claire had watched me tape Grace's drawing inside my old leather wallet, the one with the cracked corner. I still carried it. I touched it in my pocket and felt sick. Judge Marlowe asked, "Mrs. Whitman, were these withdrawals disclosed to Mr. Whitman?" Claire raised her chin. "I did what I had to do." That was not my question. I was protecting Grace. "From college?" I asked. Ruth touched my sleeve under the table. I stopped. Claire's eyes sharpened at my slip. There. That tone. That constant judgment. That is what Grace lives under. Sandra leaned forward. "Claire, he asked about money." Claire turned. "You don't understand what it was like in that house." Sandra's face changed. "In that house? You lived in that house too." Judith said, "Sandra, please." Claire carried that marriage for years. Claire nodded quickly, accepting the rescue. I did. I kept everything from falling apart. Daniel worked late, came home tired, then acted like Grace owed him a performance. My jaw tightened. "A performance?" "You wanted the perfect daughter," Claire said. "Perfect grades. Perfect plans. Perfect little architect dream." Ruth said, "Mrs. Whitman, when did Daniel first mention architecture to Grace?" Claire blinked. "What? When did he first pressure Grace into architecture?" Claire glanced at Miles. "I don't remember the exact date. Was it before or after Grace won the 4th grade model bridge contest?" Claire's mouth parted. I looked at Ruth. She had found the photograph. Ruth lifted it from her folder. "Grace is holding a cardboard bridge. She wrote on the back, 'I want to build things forever.' That is dated 3 years before my client opened the college fund." Claire's lips thinned. "One picture does not define a child." "No," Ruth said. "But neither does a statement edited by her mother." Miles stood. "Objection." Judge Marlowe said, sustained in tone. "Rephrase." Ruth nodded. "Was Grace's written statement drafted entirely by Grace?" Claire's face softened again, but this time it looked rushed. She was upset. I helped her organize her feelings. "Did you type it?" Claire hesitated. "Yes." Judith whispered, "Claire." Claire turned slightly. "She asked me to." Ruth asked, "Did Grace review the final version?" She was too emotional. A silence settled over the courtroom. Judge Marlowe put her pen down. "Mrs. Whitman, are you telling this court the statement submitted as Grace's words was not reviewed by Grace?" Claire swallowed. "I am saying I preserved what she told me." Ruth said, "That is not preservation. That is authorship." Miles said, "Your Honor." Judge Marlowe lifted one finger. "No. I want the answer on the record." Claire stared at the judge. "No, she did not review the final version." Sandra covered her mouth. Judith sat very still. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. Because the lie was losing strength, but it had already taken months from me. Ruth picked up another document. There is also a school counselor listed in the filing. Evan Pierce. Judge Marlowe looked at the clerk. "Is Mr. Pierce present?" The clerk nodded. "He is outside, Your Honor." Claire stiffened. Miles whispered, "We didn't request testimony today." Judge Marlowe said, "You requested emergency restriction. I am allowed to ask why." The clerk opened the door. Evan Pierce stepped in wearing a navy blazer and carrying a worn notebook. He looked like a man who wished he were anywhere else. Judge Marlowe swore him in. Ruth approached gently. Mr. Pierce, did Grace Whitman speak with you privately? Yes. Claire leaned back with a small breath, as if that helped her. Ruth asked, did she tell you she feared her father? Evan looked at Claire. Then at me. Then down at his notebook. She said she felt trapped between what adults were telling her. Miles stood. That is vague. Judge Marlowe said, let him answer. Evan continued. She did not say Mr. Whitman threatened her. Claire closed her eyes. Ruth asked, did she say why she stopped answering him? Evan paused. She said her phone was being checked. Claire whispered, that is not fair. Judge Marlowe heard it. Mrs. Whitman, do not coach the witness from your seat. Claire's face flushed. Evan looked miserable. She also asked whether a parent could see messages after they were deleted. My hands went cold. Ruth asked, did she say who deleted them? Evan took a breath. She did not name anyone directly. Claire's shoulders dropped with relief. But, Evan said, she said, Mom says it's better if Dad thinks I'm angry than if he thinks I'm confused. The words landed like a door closing. I stared at Claire. She would not look at me. Judith finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Claire, did you say that? Claire's eyes filled fast. Mom, I was trying to keep Grace stable. Judith did not nod this time. Sandra leaned forward. You told us Daniel was harassing her. He was, Claire snapped. With 9 messages? Sandra asked. Claire turned on her. You have no idea what emotional pressure looks like. Sandra's voice went quiet. I know what manipulation is starting to look like. Claire froze. That was the first time someone from her side said it. Not Ruth. Not me. Sandra. Judge Marlowe wrote something down. Ruth returned to counsel table. Miles stood, but his confidence had thinned. Your Honor, families under stress make imperfect decisions. Mrs. Whitman may have mishandled communication, but that does not erase Grace's anxiety. Judge Marlowe said, no one said it did. Miles continued. We ask the court to maintain caution. Ruth stood. My client is not asking for reckless access. He is asking the court not to reward the person who created silence and then called it evidence. I looked at Claire. Her face was wet now, but I no longer trusted tears as proof of pain. Judge Marlowe looked at Evan. Mr. Pierce, did Grace ask to speak to the court? Evan's fingers tightened around his notebook. She asked what would happen if she told the truth. My breath stopped. Claire whispered, no. Judge Marlowe turned to her. Why would that concern you, Mrs. Whitman? Claire looked around the courtroom. For the first time, she seemed aware that every soft word had hardened into record. I don't want my daughter dragged into this. I heard my own voice before I planned it. Then stop hiding behind her. The room went still. Judge Marlowe looked at me, and I thought she might reprimand me. Instead, she said, Mr. Whitman, through counsel. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. But I did not take the words back. Claire stared at me like I had betrayed her by surviving the first round. Ruth slid the bank alerts back into the folder. Your Honor, we request that no financial authority be transferred today and that all withdrawals from Grace Whitman's college fund be preserved for audit. Judge Marlowe said, granted pending review. Claire's face strained. Miles leaned toward her. Stay calm. I almost smiled at that. Not because I was happy. Because for months, Claire had told everyone I was the unstable one. Now she was the one being told to stay calm. Judge Marlowe looked at both tables. We will take a short recess. When we return, I want clarity on the child's current communication access, counseling records, and any written notes Grace may have provided to school staff. Evan looked down. Claire saw it. So did I. There was more. And this time, I was not afraid of it. The recess did not feel like a break. It felt like being placed in a smaller room with the same blade. Ruth guided me into a side conference area with frosted glass walls and a round table that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Sit, she said. I can't. Then stand quietly. I stood by the window and looked at the parking lot below. Cars moved like nothing in the world had shifted. My daughter's college fund had been drained. My messages had been blocked. And somewhere in all of this, Grace had asked what would happen if she told the truth. Ruth opened her laptop. We have 20 minutes. We use them. I looked at her. How do you use 20 minutes after 14 months? One fact at a time. Sandra stepped into the room behind us. She held her coffee cup with both hands, but it had gone cold. Daniel, she said. I turned. She looked different now. Smaller. Ashamed. I should have asked you more questions. You believed what you were given. That's not an excuse. No, I said. But it's a start. Sandra swallowed. Claire told me you were spiraling. She said you called Grace every night. I called twice in June. She said you showed up at school. I dropped off art supplies at the front desk. She said Grace begged her to make it stop. I looked down at my hands. The table edge had left a red line across my palm from where I had been gripping it inside the courtroom. She didn't beg me for anything, I said. Because Claire made sure she couldn't reach me. Sandra's face tightened. I don't know what to do with that. Ruth didn't look up from her laptop. You watch. You remember. And if asked, you tell the truth. Sandra nodded slowly. I can do that. The door opened before I could answer. Claire stood there. Miles was not with her. That alone made Ruth stand. Mrs. Whitman, this is not appropriate. Claire looked at Ruth, then at Sandra, then at me. I need 1 minute with my husband. Estranged husband, Ruth said. Claire ignored her. Daniel, please. Her voice was low now. No courtroom softness. No tissue. No cross necklace touching. Just Claire. The woman who knew which scars were old enough to press. I said, anything you say can be said in front of my attorney. Claire smiled sadly. You sound like a stranger. No. I sound like someone who learned. She stepped inside anyway. Ruth moved between us. I'm telling you clearly. Leave. Claire looked around Ruth's shoulder. If you keep pushing, Grace will have to speak in front of everyone. My stomach tightened. Claire saw it. She's fragile, she said. You know that. She hates public attention. Imagine her sitting there while strangers ask about her phone, her therapist, her messages. Sandra said, Claire, don't. Claire turned on her. You don't know what this could do to her. Sandra's jaw trembled, but she did not back away. I know what hiding the truth has already done. Claire's eyes flashed. I protected her. No, I said. You used her fear of conflict as a lock. Claire looked back at me. Keep saying things like that, and she'll hear them. Good. That stopped her. I took one breath. Slow. Through my nose. Grace should hear the truth spoken calmly. Claire's face went flat. You think calm makes you clean? No, I said. Evidence does. For the first time, I heard my own voice and did not hate how steady it was. Claire took a step closer. You want evidence? Fine. I have emails. Ruth lifted her chin. What emails? Claire's mouth curved. The ones Grace sent Daniel. The ones where she said she didn't want him at her recital. The ones where she said he made everything about himself. My chest pulled tight. Ruth turned to me. What emails? I shook my head. I got one. Sandra whispered, one? I looked at Ruth. 3 months ago. From Grace's account. It said I embarrassed her. It said not to come to the winter showcase. Claire's eyes glittered. She meant it. I remembered that night too clearly. The blue glow of my phone in the kitchen. The dishwasher humming. The first line. Dad, please stop acting like you're the only parent who cares. I had sat on the floor because my niece stopped knowing what to do. I had not gone to the showcase. I had mailed flowers instead. They came back 2 days later with no note. That was the night I believed I was losing my daughter. Not because Claire told me so. Because I thought Grace had. Ruth's voice cut through the memory. Forward that email to me now. Claire's smile thinned. That won't help him. Ruth looked at me. Now, Daniel. I opened my phone. My thumb hovered over Grace's name. Even seeing it hurt. I searched the email, opened it, and forwarded it to Ruth. The paper folder on the table had sharp corners. I pressed my fingertip against one until the sting pulled me back into the room. Ruth opened the email. Then she clicked. Then she stopped. Interesting. Claire said, what? Ruth did not answer her. She looked at me. Daniel, did Grace usually write like this? No. What did she call you? Dad. Not Daniel? Never. Ruth turned the laptop slightly toward Sandra. Sandra read the screen and whispered, she called you Daniel in the 3rd paragraph. Claire crossed her arms. She was angry. Ruth clicked again. The email was sent from Grace's account, but the device marker shows a desktop login. Miles appeared at the door behind Claire. Claire, he said sharply. Come out. Ruth looked at him. Mr. Avery, good timing. Your client just introduced a new piece of evidence. Miles's expression changed. Claire, what did you say? Claire said, nothing. Ruth smiled. She mentioned emails. We checked one. It appears to have been sent from a desktop device at the Whitman residence. Claire snapped, Grace used the computer. I said, Grace was at camp that week. Claire froze. Sandra looked at me. Are you sure? I opened my photos. There. I showed her the picture. Grace standing beside Lake Wren with a camp lanyard around her neck, hair pulled back, giving a thumbs up like she was pretending not to be excited. The date was stamped in the corner. Ruth said, the email was sent Tuesday at 9:18 p.m. Camp rules say no personal devices after 7. And according to the camp pickup log, Grace did not return home until Friday. Miles closed his eyes. Claire. Claire looked at him like he had betrayed her. You said metadata wouldn't matter unless he challenged it. The room went silent. Ruth's eyebrows lifted. Sandra took one step back. I felt the floor under my shoes, hard and steady. Ruth said, thank you, Mrs. Whitman. Claire realized what she had done. No. That is not what I meant. Miles grabbed her elbow. We are leaving. Claire pulled away from him and looked at me. You were going to ruin everything. What everything? My relationship with her, Claire said. You always had the easy love. You walked into rooms and she lit up. I did the appointments, the rules, the hard parts. You got the smile. The words shook when they came out. Not grief. Resentment. Sandra whispered, Claire, she's your daughter. Claire's eyes filled. She is my daughter. And he kept making her dream about leaving. I stared at her. College is not leaving you. To you it wasn't. My voice lowered. So you made her believe I left first. Claire said nothing. Miles pulled the door open wider. Now. She stepped backward, but her eyes stayed on me. You don't know what she'll choose when this is over. I looked at her. I'm not asking her to choose. Claire's mouth tightened. I am. Then Miles dragged her out. The door shut behind them. For a moment, no one spoke. The lemon cleaner smell felt stronger. The light through the frosted glass turned everyone into pale shadows. Sandra sat down hard. She sent that email. I nodded. Sandra looked sick. And I told you to respect Grace's boundaries. You thought they were Grace's. I should have known, she said. I wanted to tell her it was fine. But it wasn't. So I said nothing. Ruth closed her laptop. This changes the power balance. How? She admitted awareness of metadata. She tied the email to a strategy. And she revealed motive. Sandra looked up. Motive? Ruth nodded. Control. Not safety. My phone buzzed. For one wild second, I thought it might be Grace. It was an old voicemail reminder I had saved and forgotten to archive. Grace, 2 years ago. I hit play before I could stop myself. Dad, don't forget the blue folders for my presentation. And don't wear the ugly tie. Actually, wear it. It makes people feel sorry for me. Her laugh cracked through the tiny speaker. My hand covered my mouth. Sandra started crying quietly. I stopped the message. Ruth's voice softened. You can break later. I nodded, but my eyes burned. What if Grace hates that we're doing this? Ruth leaned closer. Daniel, children do not need parents who avoid truth to avoid discomfort. They need adults who can hold truth without turning it into a weapon. I looked at the closed door. Claire had tried insults. Then fake care. Then rewritten history. Now threats. Each one had moved her farther from Grace and closer to what she really wanted. Not protection. Possession. The clerk knocked once. Court is back in session. Ruth gathered the papers. Sandra stood. This time, she moved beside me. Not behind Claire. I looked at her. You don't have to sit with me. Sandra wiped her face. Yes, I do. We walked back toward the courtroom. My fear did not disappear. It changed shape. It became focus. Claire had planned for me to fight like a wounded man. Instead, I walked in with the email, the metadata, the bank alerts, and the first clear breath I had taken all day. When we stepped back into the courtroom, Claire was already seated. She had fixed her face again. Soft eyes. Folded hands. Chin slightly lowered. But the tissue was gone. That mattered. People show you who they are when they stop decorating the lie. Judge Marlowe entered, and everyone stood. The room carried that quiet pressure courts have, like even the walls are listening. I sat beside Ruth. Sandra sat behind me. Across the aisle, Judith sat behind Claire, but not close enough to touch her shoulder anymore. That space was small. It was also new. Judge Marlowe looked at both tables. We are back on the record. Ms. Bennett, you indicated there may be additional materials related to communication access and written notes. Ruth stood. Yes, Your Honor. During recess, Mrs. Whitman referenced emails allegedly written by Grace to my client. One of those emails appears to have been sent from a desktop device while Grace was away at summer camp. Miles stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Your Honor, this is improper. Opposing counsel is introducing technical claims without authentication. Ruth turned slightly. Then we request preservation and forensic review. Judge Marlowe nodded. That is reasonable. Claire leaned toward Miles. He whispered, do not speak. Claire ignored him. Daniel is twisting a family misunderstanding into a criminal accusation. Ruth looked at the judge. Your Honor, I would also like the court to hear that Mrs. Whitman stated in recess, in front of witnesses, you said metadata wouldn't matter unless he challenged it. Miles closed his eyes. Judge Marlowe looked at Claire. Did you say that? Claire pressed her lips together. I was upset. That was not my question. Claire stared at the table. I may have said something like that. Sandra whispered behind me, oh my God. Judith turned slowly toward Claire. Claire. Claire's head snapped around. Mom, not now. Judith's face went pale. You told me he invented that email. Claire looked furious for half a second, then hurt again. I told you what I believed at the time. No, Judith said. You told me he was punishing Grace for not answering him. Miles said, Mrs. Caldwell, please remain quiet. Judith sat back, but her eyes did not leave Claire. Ruth said, Your Honor, we believe this pattern connects to the financial requests, the blocked communication, the unreviewed statement, and the emergency motion. Judge Marlowe looked at Claire. Mrs. Whitman, this court is concerned. Claire's voice shook. Concerned about me? He is the one who kept pushing. He is the one who wouldn't let Grace breathe. I looked down at my hands. They were not shaking now. That almost scared me more. Ruth said, My client has not requested unrestricted control. He has requested contact, transparency, and protection of Grace's funds. Claire laughed bitterly. There it is. Funds. That is what this is really about. I turned to her. No. That is what it became when you took her money. Claire's eyes flashed. I moved money because you would have trapped her with it. Trapped her how? By making her need you. The words came out too sharp. Even Claire heard it. The room held still. Ruth stepped closer to the bench. Your Honor, we request that the withdrawals be frozen for review and that Mrs. Whitman provide documentation for every expense claimed as therapy, legal safety, or child-related. Miles said, We can provide documentation later. Judge Marlowe asked, Can you provide any today? Miles looked at Claire. Claire looked away. No, he said. Judith's voice came from behind her. Claire, you borrowed $5,000 from me for legal fees. Claire did not turn. Mom. You told me Daniel emptied Grace's account. Claire whispered, Please stop. Judith's voice cracked. Did you use Grace's money too? Miles stood. Your Honor, this is turning into a public family argument. Judge Marlowe said, It became relevant when your client asked for emergency authority over a child while funds were moving. Sit down. Miles sat. Claire gripped the edge of the table. I was desperate. That was the first honest word she had said all morning. I felt it move through the room. Desperate. Not protective. Not afraid. Desperate. Ruth's voice stayed calm. Desperate for what? Claire looked at me. For him to stop winning. My throat tightened. There it was. The shape under the mask. Judge Marlowe's pen stopped moving. Claire seemed to realize she had spoken too plainly. I mean, he always gets to be the good one. The patient one. The stable one. Even when he is suffocating people. I said, You didn't want Grace safe. You wanted me punished. Claire turned her face away. Miles whispered, Do not answer. Ruth said, Your Honor, Mr. Pierce indicated before recess that Grace asked what would happen if she told the truth. We ask the court to review any sealed note or school record Grace provided. Evan Pierce stood near the side wall. He looked at the judge, then at Claire. I do have a note. Claire stood. No. The single word cracked through the courtroom. Judge Marlowe looked at her sharply. Mrs. Whitman, sit down. Claire sat, but her breathing changed. Fast. Shallow. Evan held a folded envelope with both hands. It was given to me by Grace 6 days ago. She asked me to keep it sealed unless court became involved. Miles stood again. Your Honor, we object to disclosure without proper process. Judge Marlowe said, "I will review it in camera first." Claire whispered she didn't understand what she was doing. I looked at her. She understood enough to hide it from you. Claire's eyes cut toward me. "You're enjoying this?" "No," I said. And I meant it. Nothing about watching the mother of my child unravel felt good. It felt like opening a locked room and finding my daughter had been inside it the whole time. If you believe receipts matter more than rumors, stay with this, because the receipts are about to speak. Evan handed the envelope to the clerk, who carried it to Judge Marlowe. The judge opened it carefully. No one moved. I heard the paper unfold. That tiny sound almost broke me. Because Grace had folded it herself. Judge Marlowe read in silence. Claire stared at the envelope like it was breathing. Judith's hand covered her mouth. Sandra leaned forward, waiting. I wanted to see the note. I also wanted to run from it. There are truths a father begs for, then fears, because what if the truth says you were too late? Judge Marlowe looked up. "Mr. Pierce, did Grace write this in your presence?" Evan nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." "Was she coached?" "No." Claire whispered, "You don't know that." Evan turned toward her. "I know she asked me to close the office door before she wrote it." Claire's face hardened. "She has anxiety." Evan's voice stayed quiet. "She said she had anxiety about going home with unfinished sentences." That line hit me harder than any accusation. Unfinished sentences. How many times had Grace tried to tell the truth and stopped because Claire was standing too close? Judge Marlowe looked at Miles. "I will not read the contents aloud without further determination, but I will say the note raises concerns about communication interference and possible coaching." Ruth nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." Claire leaned forward. "Possible? You're taking a child's emotional scribble and treating it like evidence?" Evan's expression shifted. For the first time, he did not look conflicted. He looked angry. "She is not scribbling, Mrs. Whitman. She is asking adults to stop speaking over her." Claire recoiled. Judith whispered, "Claire, what did you do?" Claire turned to her mother. "I kept my daughter from being pulled away from me." I said, "By telling her I stopped coming?" Claire froze. Ruth turned to me. "What?" I looked at Claire. "That's why she asked Mr. Pierce what would happen if she told the truth." Claire's mouth moved, but no sound came. I continued. "You told Grace I missed hearings. You told her I didn't answer court notices. You told her I stopped fighting." Judith said, "Claire?" Sandra stood halfway. "Is that true?" Claire looked cornered now. Not sad. Not noble. Cornered. "She was obsessed with whether he would show up," Claire said. My breath stopped. "So you told her I didn't?" Claire's eyes filled. "I told her she needed to stop waiting for someone who kept hurting us." The room went quiet. My chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out. 14 months. Every courthouse visit. Every message unanswered. Every time I sat outside school in my car and decided not to make a scene because I thought patience was kindness. Grace had been told I was gone. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling lights. They blurred. Ruth's voice came close. "Daniel." I looked at her. She spoke softly. "Stay here." "I am." Claire started crying then. Real tears, maybe. But real tears do not clean fake facts. Judge Marlowe's voice was firm. "Mrs. Whitman, did you tell Grace that Mr. Whitman failed to appear at prior hearings?" Claire wiped her cheek. "I told her he wasn't there for her emotionally." "That is not my question." Claire's lips trembled. "Yes." Sandra sat down slowly. Judith looked like she had aged 10 years in 1 minute. Judge Marlowe wrote something down. Ruth stood. Your Honor, my client has attended every scheduled proceeding. We have appearance records. Judge Marlowe nodded. The court has those records. I looked at Claire. My voice came out low. You made her grieve a living father. Claire looked at me, and for a second, she had no script left. I was grieving too. No, I said. This line had to stand alone. You were competing. Claire covered her face. Miles asked for another recess. Judge Marlowe denied it. No. We will proceed. Ruth leaned toward me and whispered, "This is the turn." I looked at the judge. Then at Evan. Then at Sandra and Judith, both no longer standing where they started that morning. The room had shifted. Not loudly. Not with gasps or dramatic collapse. Just truth moving furniture inside people. Judge Marlowe looked at Evan. Is Grace available to the court today? Claire's head lifted. Evan hesitated. Yes, Your Honor. My heart slammed once. She is in the building? Evan looked at me gently. She asked to come if the court allowed it. Claire whispered, No. No, she can't. Judge Marlowe looked toward the side door. Bring the court liaison in. My hands finally shook again. Not from fear this time. From hope. And hope, after betrayal, is the most dangerous feeling of all. The side door opened slowly. I heard the hinge before I saw her. That small metal sound cut through every breath in the courtroom. Grace walked in beside the court liaison, Emma Bell, with Evan Pierce one step behind her. She wore a blue sweater. The same blue sweater I had left at the school front desk months ago. Her hair was tucked behind one ear. Her fingers held the strap of a canvas bag. She looked thinner than I remembered, older in that unfair way children look older after adults make them carry things. Then she saw me. And she smiled. Not big. Not bright. Not careless. Relieved. My chest folded around that smile. I wanted to stand. I wanted to say her name. I wanted to cross the room and pull every stolen month out of the space between us. But I stayed seated because her eyes asked me to be steady. Claire whispered, Grace. Grace's smile faded when she looked at her mother. Judge Marlowe softened her voice. Grace, do you understand where you are? Grace nodded. Yes, ma'am. You are not in trouble. I know. You do not have to speak in open court if you are uncomfortable. Grace glanced at Evan, then at Emma, then at me. I want to. Claire's chair creaked. Sweetheart, you're confused. Grace looked at her. No, Mom. I'm tired. The room went still. Just once, a murmur moved through the back row, then died when Judge Marlowe looked up. That was the only reaction the room got. Judge Marlowe said, Mrs. Whitman, you will not interrupt. Claire's mouth trembled. Yes, Your Honor. Grace stepped closer to the witness area. Evan said, Grace asked me to be nearby. Judge Marlowe nodded. He may remain. Ruth leaned toward me. Do not react unless she comes to you. I nodded, but my eyes would not leave my daughter. Grace sat down. The chair looked too large around her. Judge Marlowe asked, Grace, did you write the note Mr. Pierce gave the court? Yes. Did anyone tell you what to write? No. Claire whispered, Grace. Judge Marlowe said, Mrs. Whitman. Claire looked down. Grace took a breath. My mom told me if I talked too much, I would make Dad angry. My hands closed under the table. Ruth's hand touched my wrist once. Grace continued. But Dad doesn't get angry like that. He gets quiet. And sometimes I thought quiet meant he stopped caring. I felt my eyes burn. Claire shook her head. That's not fair. Grace looked at her. You told me he didn't come to court. Claire's lips parted. You were too young to understand. I was 15. Judith made a small sound behind Claire. Grace looked toward her grandmother. Grandma, she told me Dad missed 3 hearings. Judith covered her mouth. I didn't know. Grace nodded. I know. Judge Marlowe asked, Grace, did your father miss those hearings? Grace looked at me. No. I found the court calendar on the school computer. His name was there. Claire closed her eyes. Grace reached into her canvas bag. I printed it. Miles stood. Your Honor, we object to the child producing documents without foundation. Judge Marlowe looked at him. Mr. Avery, I will decide. Wait later. Sit down. He sat. Grace gave the papers to Emma, who passed them to the clerk. Then Grace reached into the bag again. My heart moved strangely in my chest. She pulled out envelopes. A stack of them. White, cream, pale blue. My letters. Every one I had mailed when her phone went silent. Grace held them in both hands. Mom said he stopped writing. Claire whispered, I never said stopped. Grace looked at her. You said, your father is moving on with his life. Claire's face crumpled. I was trying to help you accept reality. Grace's voice shook. No. You were trying to make me stop waiting at the window. That sentence did something to me I could not hide. I looked down fast. The table blurred. I remembered every letter. The birthday one with the bad drawing of a cupcake. The one with the picture of the museum exhibit she wanted to see. The one where I wrote, I do not know what you have been told, but I am here. Grace touched the top envelope. I found these in Mom's closet. Claire's head snapped up. You went through my things? Grace flinched. Then she steadied. I went looking for my art portfolio. The letters were in a shoebox behind your winter boots. Sandra whispered, Claire. Claire turned. Don't you start. Sandra's face hardened. No. I should have started months ago. Judge Marlowe said, order. Grace swallowed. There's more. Claire's voice turned thin. Grace, please. Grace looked at her mother. You always say please when someone is about to tell the truth. Claire's face dropped. That was the one reaction that mattered. No scream. No collapse. Just her mask falling in front of the person she had used it on. Grace pulled out her phone. I recorded some things. Miles stood again. Your Honor. Judge Marlowe said, Ms. Bell, take the device. We are not playing anything until reviewed. Grace nodded quickly. I understand. I just wanted you to know I have it. Ruth asked gently, Grace, what kind of things did you record? Grace looked at the judge first. Mom telling me what to say if anyone asked why I didn't want to see Dad. Claire whispered, I was preparing you. Grace turned to her. You told me to say he made me feel unsafe. Claire's voice broke. Because you said you were anxious. I was anxious because you kept asking me if I loved him more. Judith started crying silently. Grace looked at her grandmother again. You told Grandma Dad emptied my college fund. Judith nodded, tears moving down her cheeks. She did. Grace looked at me. I checked the bank emails Dad forwarded to my school account last year. The account wasn't empty then. Claire looked stunned. You had those? Grace nodded. Dad sent them before you blocked him. I saved them. Ruth's voice was low. Grace, did your father ask you to save those emails? No. Did he tell you to record your mother? No. Did he tell you to come here today? Grace looked at me again. No. I didn't even know if he knew I was here. I could not stop myself. I didn't. Grace's mouth trembled, but she smiled again. I hoped you'd still come anyway. I pressed my hand flat to the table. I came every time. I know now. Those 3 words were small. They gave me back air. Judge Marlowe looked at Claire. Mrs. Whitman, I have heard enough to rule on today's emergency motion. Claire leaned forward. Your Honor, Grace is emotional. She doesn't understand the long-term damage. Grace said, I understand damage. Claire froze. Grace's voice softened. I understand missing my dad while thinking he chose not to miss me. Judge Marlowe's face stayed controlled, but her pen stopped moving again. Ruth said nothing. She did not need to. The truth had finally learned to stand without being carried. Judge Marlowe spoke clearly. The emergency request to restrict Mr. Whitman's communication is denied. Claire inhaled sharply. The court orders immediate restoration of reasonable direct communication between Grace Whitman and Mr. Whitman, under temporary guidelines to be drafted today. Miles closed his folder. Judge Marlowe continued. All funds withdrawn from the college account will be subject to accounting. No further withdrawals without court approval. The device and recordings referenced by Grace will be preserved and reviewed through proper process. Claire stared at the bench. Your Honor. I am not finished. Claire went silent. Concerns regarding interference, coaching, and misrepresentation will be referred for evaluation. Counseling will continue, but both parents shall receive basic provider information unless restricted by separate order. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not to pray. To keep myself from breaking in front of Grace. When I opened them, she was looking at me. Judge Marlowe said, Grace, you may step down. Grace stood slowly. Claire reached a hand toward her. Baby, come here. Grace stopped. Then she looked at Emma. Do I have to? Emma looked at the judge. Judge Marlowe said, no. Claire's hand fell. Grace walked around the table. Not to Claire. To me. Ruth moved her chair back. I stood, but I did not reach first. Grace stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the tiny fray on her sweater sleeve. The same sleeve I had folded months ago. Hi, Dad, she said. My voice almost failed. Hi, Gracie. She held out the stack of letters. I kept every one. I looked at them, then at her. I wrote every one. I know. I thought you hated me. I thought you left me. The words stood between us for one breath. Then Grace stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her like something sacred and injured. Not tight enough to trap. Not loose enough to doubt. Her shoulders shook once against my chest. I smiled because I knew you'd still be there, she whispered. My hand rested carefully on the back of her head. I was scared you'd stopped looking. Never. Claire was crying behind us, but I did not turn. For the first time in 14 months, her tears were not the center of the room. Grace was. Sandra stood beside us, crying openly now. Judith stayed seated, both hands folded in her lap, looking at her daughter like she was seeing the cost instead of the excuse. Evan Pierce wiped his eyes once and looked away. Judge Marlowe let the silence breathe. Then she said, we are adjourned for today. Grace did not let go until the gavel sounded. And when she finally stepped back, she smiled again. This time, I smiled too. The side door opened slowly. I heard the hinge before I saw her. That small metal sound cut through every breath in the courtroom. Grace walked in beside the court liaison, Emma Bell, with Evan Pierce one step behind her. She wore a blue sweater. The same blue sweater I had left at the school front desk months ago. Her hair was tucked behind one ear. Her fingers held the strap of a canvas bag. She looked thinner than I remembered, older in that unfair way children look older after adults make them carry things. Then she saw me. And she smiled. Not big. Not bright. Not careless. Relieved. My chest folded around that smile. I wanted to stand. I wanted to say her name. I wanted to cross the room and pull every stolen month out of the space between us. But I stayed seated because her eyes asked me to be steady. Claire whispered, "Grace." Grace's smile faded when she looked at her mother. Judge Marlowe softened her voice. "Grace, do you understand where you are?" Grace nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You are not in trouble." "I know. You do not have to speak in open court if you are uncomfortable." Grace glanced at Evan, then at Emma, then at me. "I want to." Claire's chair creaked. "Sweetheart, you're confused." Grace looked at her. "No, Mom. I'm tired." The room went still. Just once, a murmur moved through the back row, then died when Judge Marlowe looked up. That was the only reaction the room got. Judge Marlowe said, "Mrs. Whitman, you will not interrupt." Claire's mouth trembled. "Yes, Your Honor." Grace stepped closer to the witness area. Evan said, "Grace asked me to be nearby." Judge Marlowe nodded. "He may remain." Ruth leaned toward me. "Do not react unless she comes to you." I nodded, but my eyes would not leave my daughter. Grace sat down. The chair looked too large around her. Judge Marlowe asked, "Grace, did you write the note Mr. Pierce gave the court?" "Yes." "Did anyone tell you what to write?" "No." Claire whispered, "Grace." Judge Marlowe said, "Mrs. Whitman." Claire looked down. Grace took a breath. "My mom told me if I talked too much, I would make Dad angry." My hands closed under the table. Ruth's hand touched my wrist once. Grace continued. "But Dad doesn't get angry like that. He gets quiet. And sometimes I thought quiet meant he stopped caring." I felt my eyes burn. Claire shook her head. "That's not fair." Grace looked at her. "You told me he didn't come to court." Claire's lips parted. "You were too young to understand." "I was 15. Judith made a small sound behind Claire. Grace looked toward her grandmother. "Grandma, she told me Dad missed 3 hearings." Judith covered her mouth. "I didn't know." Grace nodded. "I know." Judge Marlowe asked, "Grace, did your father miss those hearings?" Grace looked at me. "No. I found the court calendar on the school computer. His name was there." Claire closed her eyes. Grace reached into her canvas bag. "I printed it." Miles stood. "Your Honor, we object to the child producing documents without foundation." Judge Marlowe looked at him. "Mr. Avery, I will decide wait later." "Sit down." He sat. Grace gave the papers to Emma, who passed them to the clerk. Then Grace reached into the bag again. My heart moved strangely in my chest. She pulled out envelopes. A stack of them. White, cream, pale blue. My letters. Every one I had mailed when her phone went silent. Grace held them in both hands. "Mom said he stopped writing." Claire whispered, "I never said stopped." Grace looked at her. "You said, your father is moving on with his life." Claire's face crumpled. "I was trying to help you accept reality." Grace's voice shook. "No. You were trying to make me stop waiting at the window." That sentence did something to me I could not hide. I looked down fast. The table blurred. I remembered every letter. The birthday one with the bad drawing of a cupcake. The one with the picture of the museum exhibit she wanted to see. The one where I wrote, "I do not know what you have been told, but I am here." Grace touched the top envelope. "I found these in Mom's closet." Claire's head snapped up. "You went through my things?" Grace flinched. Then she steadied. "I went looking for my art portfolio. The letters were in a shoebox behind your winter boots." Sandra whispered, "Claire." Claire turned. "Don't you start." Sandra's face hardened. "No. I should have started months ago." Judge Marlowe said, "Order." Grace swallowed. There's more. Claire's voice turned thin. Grace, please. Grace looked at her mother. You always say please when someone is about to tell the truth. Claire's face dropped. That was the one reaction that mattered. No scream. No collapse. Just her mask falling in front of the person she had used it on. Grace pulled out her phone. I recorded some things. Miles stood again. Your Honor. Judge Marlowe said, Ms. Bell, take the device. We are not playing anything until reviewed. Grace nodded quickly. I understand. I just wanted you to know I have it. Ruth asked gently, Grace, what kind of things did you record? Grace looked at the judge first. Mom telling me what to say if anyone asked why I didn't want to see Dad. Claire whispered, I was preparing you. Grace turned to her. You told me to say he made me feel unsafe. Claire's voice broke. Because you said you were anxious. I was anxious because you kept asking me if I loved him more. Judith started crying silently. Grace looked at her grandmother again. You told Grandma Dad emptied my college fund. Judith nodded, tears moving down her cheeks. She did. Grace looked at me. I checked the bank emails Dad forwarded to my school account last year. The account wasn't empty then. Claire looked stunned. You had those? Grace nodded. Dad sent them before you blocked him. I saved them. Ruth's voice was low. Grace, did your father ask you to save those emails? No. Did he tell you to record your mother? No. Did he tell you to come here today? Grace looked at me again. No. I didn't even know if he knew I was here. I could not stop myself. I didn't. Grace's mouth trembled, but she smiled again. I hoped you'd still come anyway. I pressed my hand flat to the table. I came every time. I know now. Those 3 words were small. They gave me back air. Judge Marlowe looked at Claire. Mrs. Whitman, I have heard enough to rule on today's emergency motion. Claire leaned forward. Your Honor, Grace is emotional. She doesn't understand the long-term damage. Grace said, I understand damage. Claire froze. Grace's voice softened. I understand missing my dad while thinking he chose not to miss me. Judge Marlowe's face stayed controlled, but her pen stopped moving again. Ruth said nothing. She did not need to. The truth had finally learned to stand without being carried. Judge Marlowe spoke clearly. The emergency request to restrict Mr. Whitman's communication is denied. Claire inhaled sharply. The court orders immediate restoration of reasonable direct communication between Grace Whitman and Mr. Whitman, under temporary guidelines to be drafted today. Miles closed his folder. Judge Marlowe continued. All funds withdrawn from the college account will be subject to accounting. No further withdrawals without court approval. The device and recordings referenced by Grace will be preserved and reviewed through proper process. Claire stared at the bench. Your Honor. I am not finished. Claire went silent. Concerns regarding interference, coaching, and misrepresentation will be referred for evaluation. Counseling will continue, but both parents shall receive basic provider information unless restricted by separate order. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not to pray. To keep myself from breaking in front of Grace. When I opened them, she was looking at me. Judge Marlowe said, Grace, you may step down. Grace stood slowly. Claire reached a hand toward her. Baby, come here. Grace stopped. Then she looked at Emma. Do I have to? Emma looked at the judge. Judge Marlowe said, no. Claire's hand fell. Grace walked around the table. Not to Claire. To me. Ruth moved her chair back. I stood, but I did not reach first. Grace stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the tiny fray on her sweater sleeve. The same sleeve I had folded months ago. Hi, Dad, she said. My voice almost failed. Hi, Gracie. She held out the stack of letters. I kept every one. I looked at them, then at her. I wrote every one. I know. I thought you hated me. I thought you left me. The words stood between us for one breath. Then Grace stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her like something sacred and injured. Not tight enough to trap. Not loose enough to doubt. Her shoulders shook once against my chest. I smiled because I knew you'd still be there, she whispered. My hand rested carefully on the back of her head. I was scared you'd stopped looking. Never. Claire was crying behind us, but I did not turn. For the first time in 14 months, her tears were not the center of the room. Grace was. Sandra stood beside us, crying openly now. Judith stayed seated, both hands folded in her lap, looking at her daughter like she was seeing the cost instead of the excuse. Evan Pierce wiped his eyes once and looked away. Judge Marlowe let the silence breathe. Then she said, "We are adjourned for today." Grace did not let go until the gavel sounded. And when she finally stepped back, she smiled again. This time, I smiled too.